Hi, I'm Owen Canfield with the opinion page of the Oklahoman, and I'm joined today by Mike McNutt, the chief capital correspondent for the Oklahoman, to talk about issues of the day during this past week at the legislature. Mike, always good to see you on a Friday morning. Thank you for coming in.
You bet.
Pretty busy week at the Capitol this week in a variety of ways. The big Flaming Lips controversy came to an end when the governor signed the executive order that made the Flaming Lips song the rock and roll song of the state. Ended several days of hand-wringing and disappointment by some. So that was a lot of smiles, a lot of patting on the back as that happened. I guess that's now behind us. I guess the next thing now is to move on to the next official item that really doesn't add up to a hill of beans. Am I right?
Probably move on to the budget. Why not?
Yeah, there you go. Got that out of the way. Now we can go on to the budget. Still a huge issue. We'll talk about that maybe in just a minute. You know, the other thing the governor's been busy with, other than signing executive orders, is vetoing bills. Mm-hmm. There was a story in the paper today about a bill that would have required that when insurance mandates are brought up, they're brought up only in one session and dealt with the following session. The governor said, no, that's not going to work. He earlier had vetoed a bill that would have removed testing and accountability regarding education from the umbrella of the Education Department and created a new agency. These are things that Republicans had hoped to see done. He's been pretty busy vetoing bills, though, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, and I think we kind of expected that. This is the first time he's dealing with a Republican legislature, you know, both in the House and the Senate. And, you know, in 2004, the House Republicans took over the House, but the Democrats still had control of the Senate. So Democrats kind of watched the governor's back, more or less, and they made sure that any legislation that was controversial or didn't fit into their platform, they basically stuck it away in the committee. The Republicans, then we had the even split.
2 years where they
were even, both at 24 each. And now we have the Republicans now in control. In 2006, the last time that the Democrats were in control, the governor issued 6 vetoes. Now he's up to 8.
Right.
Which is still, you know, and Governor Keating dealt with a Democratic-controlled House and Senate. He numbered quite a few vetoes.
Sure.
So the Governor Henry doesn't veto a lot of bills normally. I think 13, 14 is the most he's done in a year. But we kind of expected this would be kind of a, you know, see trial balloons going up, you know, some legislation going through. Republicans hope they can get it through, but I think in their heart of hearts they know the governor, who's opposed some of these bills,
right,
wasn't going to go for it.
Right.
And plus, you know, they want to put him on the spot because, you know, we don't know what the governor's going to do after 2010. Is he going to run for higher office in 2010, maybe 2012? The governor's saying, I'm going to fill my office as governor first and then worry about the afterwards later on. So they may be trying to get him, you know, on the issues, and so when he does run, the Republican candidate would have some information and some ammunition.
Some ammo, sure.
Yeah.
Well, now, there have been 3 or 4 cases where Republicans have lost in their effort to pass a bill. The governor has vetoed it, and they've just turned around and said, all right, fine, we'll send it to the ballot. But is there a growing sense of frustration out there, do you think, among members on among the GOP? You said that they probably knew in their heart of hearts that it wasn't going to happen, but are they disappointed nonetheless and sort of scuffling a little bit as to, you know, in other words, frustrated that they're not able to get more done as the party in power?
I think there's a feeling of frustration. I mean, the House, Republicans are getting their package through rather easily. And it seems now it's bottled up in the Senate, where early on they thought with Senator Coffey having had 2 years experience as co-leader of the Senate and would be able to just get that legislation through with no problem. He's run into a few roadblocks in the Senate. So I think the Republican senators are a little frustrated. And I think that spills over to the House because they were expecting their legislation to just go sailing through.
Right.
And so there is a matter of, it's not like they thought it would be.
Right.
And then again, and as you said earlier, the governor did veto some bills that maybe they thought maybe they could get through.
Well, an example of that sort of getting bottled up in the Senate is the school deregulation bill that would give districts a little more latitude as to how they run their shops, if you will. Education establishment, not a fan of it. Republicans think it's a good idea, but you were talking earlier off the air that it looked for a while like that thing might not have gotten through the Senate just yet. They wound up being a very close vote.
Very close vote, all along party lines, and Senator Mazie from Tulsa was absent because of some medical issues, and so they needed all 25 Republicans to vote for Senate Bill 834. And they had 2 hours to debate. All the Democrats voted against the amendments, debated against the amendments, and then when the vote came up, it was 24 to didn't have that
25th vote.
It turned out one of the Republican senators was missing, and we understand he basically thought they already voted, and so was getting ready to leave. So they held the vote for longer than usual,
right?
And finally he came in and
tracked
voted.
him down.
Yeah, tracked him down, came in and he got the 25, but just barely. If that hadn't gone through, it probably would demoralize the Senate Republicans even further.
Well, the head of the Senate Republicans, Glenn Coffey, he's been in the news all session long, or for the last several weeks, over financials. And that rose again this week when Senate Democrats, all of them, basically said, well, you need to step down. If you're not going to tell us about the loan you took out to pay off the tax bill you owed to the IRS, people are familiar with that story. That's the first time I think that as a group they came out and flat out said, you need to step down as Senate leader. There's only a month left, 3 or 4 weeks left in the session. I don't think there's any way that he's going to do that or should, but it just sort of continues to bubble up, that issue, and I think is just a burden on Glenn as we go into the last month. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, and of course, as you mentioned, all 22 Democratic senators signed this letter. First time all 22 had joined.
There have been some individual voices out there saying it, but this was the first time they gathered up to do it.
And what they're saying is that they want to see what the information is on the loan, who lent the money to him, what interest rate.
Sure.
And right now, Senator Coffey says he doesn't have to, and there is no law saying he has to.
Right.
But the Democratic senators and saying he's a public official and a leader in leadership, he should release that information. Plus, it's a burr in the saddle. I mean, it's a political liability right now of Senator Coffey. They sense it. And so they're going to make as much use of it as they can.
Right.
So this will go on, I think, for the rest of this session, unless Senator Coffey does decide to release the information, or if something else comes up. Whether there's a budget crisis or something of that nature, because the flu epidemic becomes paramount here in the state. Something that would take that off. But I think until that happens, I think the Senate Democrats see that they have a horse that'll ride a little bit on it. They're going to ride it as far as they can.
Right. You mentioned the budget. There's 3-4 weeks left in the session. There's a big hole still to fill in the budget. What are the prospects for that all coming together and allowing the session to end on time? It looks like that's still going to be the case.
Well, the House Republicans are hopeful. Senator Miller, who's the chairman of the House Appropriations and Budget Committee, and Senator Mike Johnson from the Senate Appropriation Chairman have been working on the budget the past couple of weeks. Earlier this week, both Senator Coffey and Representative Speaker Benj, have signed off on the budget.
Okay.
And now it's gone on to the House and Senate Subcommittee Appropriation Chairman. And yesterday, on Thursday, the budget was submitted to State Treasurer Scott Meacham, who is the chief budget negotiator for the governor.
Right.
And what they're hoping is that by next week, middle of next week, all the sides can come together, and there's not huge differences of opinion on how the budget is. Then they can announce a budget agreement, either late next week or maybe
early in the week
after that. If that happens, then they can start sending bills through, and Representative Miller still thinks they can get done. Speaker Bench thinks they can get done by May 22nd, which is a week earlier than the deadline.
Right. Okay, good stuff as always, Mike. I appreciate you coming in. And we ask you to continue reading about these stories each day in the Oklahoman and viewing them here on News OK TV.